They introduced a predator in class. The climax erupts when Kai activates a sound, mimicking the Vorax homeworld, singing season. The supposedly solitary apex predator suddenly performs a complex hunting dance, simulating pack behavior never before documented. The lecture hall watches spellbound as this human Deathworlder's empathetic insight shatters xenobiological dogma, forever changing how the galaxy views both predators and humans. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The synthetic sun of Zenith Academy cast long, prismatic rays through the floating gardens that surrounded the grand lecture hall. Suspended in a permanent geosynchronous orbit around the gas giant Altair 7. The Academy was the most prestigious center for xenobiological studies in the Orion Arm. Its crystal corridors hummed with the excited chatter of hundreds of species, each representing the finest minds their homeworlds had to offer. Today marked the semester's first Apex Predator demonstration, an event that typically filled the amphitheater to capacity, with students eager to observe creatures most had only studied in sanitized simulations. The hall's architecture was a marvel of xenoengineering. Concentric rings of seating surrounded a central platform where containment fields could be modulated to display specimens in controlled environments, mimicking their native habitats. Kai Armand stood at the entrance, his human frame noticeably taller and denser than most of the beings filing past him. He tugged at the sleeve of his academy uniform, which, despite being custom-fitted, still felt constrictive around his earthborn musculature. The fabric contained embedded sensors that monitored his vital signs, body temperature, and stress hormones, standard protocol for all Deathworlders permitted to study at Zenith. Deathworlder. The term itself was a constant reminder of his outsider status. Earth's gravity, atmospheric pressure, and evolutionary history had produced humans capable of surviving conditions that would instantly kill most sentient species in the galaxy. What humans considered normal was classified as extreme hazard in most academic databases. Kai was the first and only human scholarship recipient in Zenith's 300-year history. His acceptance had triggered protests, policy revisions, and ultimately, a list of restrictions longer than the Galactic Charter itself. "Excuse me, primary oxygen breather coming through," chirped a gelatinous Halcydian as it oozed around him. 3 eye stalks swiveled to examine him before retracting slightly. "Oh, human. Apologies for proximity." Kai smiled reflexively, though he knew his display of teeth might be misinterpreted by some species. "No problem at all. Please, go ahead." As the Halcydian glided away with noticeable haste, Kai sighed and stepped into the lecture hall. The murmur of conversation dipped momentarily, a subtle shift that nonetheless felt like a spotlight had been trained on him. He'd grown accustomed to the reaction, curiosity mingled with apprehension, academic interest tinged with instinctive withdrawal. The tiered seating was arranged to accommodate diverse physiologies, with gravity plates calibrated for different species' needs. Kai made his way toward a section marked for oxygen breathers with terrestrial adaptations. His scholarship status entitled him to a prime position, but he often chose less conspicuous spots. "Kai, over here!" The voice cut through the ambient chatter, and Kai spotted Mara Lynn waving from a middle row. Like him, she was human, though not a scholarship recipient but rather a transfer student from the Mars colony, where humans had established their first extrasolar educational exchange. Her presence at Zenith was less controversial. Mars-born humans were considered marginally less threatening than their Earth counterparts. Kai navigated the steps, aware of how his footfalls seemed heavier than those around him. He slid into the seat beside Mara, feeling a twinge of relief at sharing space with someone who wouldn't flinch at his proximity. "Ready for the big reveal?" Mara's eyes sparkled with excitement. "The roster says they're bringing in a Class 3 today. First live specimen in 2 cycles. "Class 3? Kai's interest peaked. "That's unusual for an opening demonstration. I thought they'd start with something more predictable. Apparently, Dr. Vexel is trying to shake things up this year. Mara lowered her voice. Word is, enrollment in practical xenobiology is down. Too many students opting for virtual labs instead. Kai was about to respond when a crystalline figure approached their row. Krinax, a Luridian, whose silicon-based body refracted light in mesmerizing patterns, stopped directly in front of them. His translucent features hardened as he focused on Kai. I see the Deathworlder contingent is growing, Krinax said, his voice a melodious chime despite the edge in his words. They'll need to reinforce the containment field generators. The fields are rated for specimens far more dangerous than us, Kai replied evenly. I checked the specs myself. Spoken like a true primitive, equating technological specifications with real security. Krinax's crystalline structure shifted, creating a rainbow effect that among his kind signified condescension. Some of us evolved beyond relying on brute force for survival. Before Kai could respond, the hall's lighting dimmed, and a soft tone reverberated through the chamber. Krinax gave them a final appraising look before gliding to a seat several rows ahead. Ignore him, Mara whispered. He's been trying to provoke you since orientation. Hard to ignore someone who sparkles that aggressively, Kai muttered, drawing a stifled laugh from Mara. The central platform illuminated as 4 faculty members entered from different points. They converged around what appeared to be a control console embedded in the floor. Dr. Vexel, the department head, stood tallest among them, her mantis-like form rising nearly 3 meters high. Her compound eyes swept the audience with a gaze that seemed to assess each student individually. Distinguished colleagues, eager minds, welcome to Advanced Xenobiology, Apex Adaptations. Dr. Vexel's voice carried naturally through the acoustic engineering of the hall. Today, we begin not with theory, but with observation. Not with data, but with life. Not with assumptions. Her gaze lingered briefly in Kai's direction, but with evidence. A murmur rippled through the audience as the central platform began to transform. The smooth floor parted, revealing a rising enclosure surrounded by the faintest shimmer of a containment field. Within it materialized what appeared to be a section of dense, alien jungle, vegetation with phosphorescent vines and thick, purple-barked trees. The Vorak Stalker, announced Dr. Vexel, apex predator of Nexus 4. This specimen has been ethically sourced through our conservation partnership with the Nexian Protectorate. Kai leaned forward involuntarily. The Vorak was legendary among xenobiologists, a creature so perfectly adapted to hunting that it had become the standard against which all predatory evolution was measured. Yet, for all its notoriety, it remained rarely studied outside of its native environment due to the extreme difficulty of maintaining it in captivity. At first, nothing seemed to move within the enclosure. Then, as if responding to some unseen cue, a section of what Kai had assumed was vegetation began to shift. It wasn't a plant at all, but the Vorak itself, its skin, a masterpiece of adaptive camouflage that rendered it nearly invisible, even to trained eyes. The creature unfolded itself with liquid grace. Standing on 6 limbs, its body resembled a sleek feline form, but with an exoskeletal ridge running along its spine. Its head housed not 2 but 4 eyes, 2 facing forward for depth perception, and 2 positioned laterally for a near 360-degree field of vision. Each eye could independently track movement, allowing the Vorak to monitor multiple potential threats or prey simultaneously. Kai's translator implant vibrated softly against his inner ear, a programmed warning that activated whenever he encountered species classified as potentially triggering to his dangerous physiology. The Academy's systems constantly monitored for anything that might stimulate what they termed Deathworlder aggressive instincts. He silenced the warning with a subtle tap to his earlobe. These safety protocols, while well-intentioned, often interfered with his ability to fully engage with his studies. Kai had never felt the predatory competitive response the Academy's behavioral scientists warned about. If anything, his reaction to apex predators was primarily academic curiosity, occasionally tinged with professional admiration. The Vorak stalker represents the pinnacle of evolutionary specialization, continued Dr. Vexel, as the creature prowled the perimeter of its enclosure. Note the sensory apparatus, capable of detecting heat signatures through solid objects, identifying pheromone trails weeks old, and perceiving sound frequencies far beyond most species' range. The audience watched, transfixed, as the Vorak suddenly froze, then shifted its coloration to match a different section of the habitat. The transformation was so seamless that had Kai blinked, he might have lost track of the creature entirely. Its chromatophores can replicate not just colors, but textures and even light patterns, explained another professor, a meridian whose gelatinous form undulated with excitement. This adaptation evolved to counter the advanced visual systems of its prey species. Kai noticed students around him clutching their datapads, recording every movement and detail. But he also noticed something else, the subtle shifting of bodies away from where he and Mara sat. A Ventosian student, 3 seats down, had quietly activated their personal atmospheric filter, a device typically used in environments with potentially toxic gases. The unspoken message was clear. In a room containing a legendary predator, some still considered the humans the more dangerous presence. Kai forced himself to focus on the demonstration. The professors had introduced a synthetic prey analog into the enclosure, a small, mobile device programmed to mimic the movements and heat signature of the Vorak's natural prey. The audience held a collective breath as the Vorak dropped into a hunting posture, its muscles coiling with potential energy. What happened next was a blur of motion so swift that many students gasped in surprise. The Vorak launched itself not directly at the prey, but at a seemingly random point in the habitat. Only when the synthetic prey fled in that exact direction did Kai understand. The Vorak had predicted its escape route with uncanny accuracy. "Observe the predictive hunting behavior," Dr. Vexel noted with professional admiration. "The Vorak doesn't chase, it intercepts. Its neurological system runs probability calculations faster than most of our computational models." As impressive as the display was, something caught Kai's attention, something subtle that the professors hadn't mentioned. Just before the Vorak pounced, there had been a momentary hesitation, a flicker of its outer eyelid. To anyone else, it might have appeared as part of the hunting sequence, but Kai recognized it from his studies of Earth predators. It was a stress response. The demonstration continued, with the professors introducing various stimuli to showcase the Vorak's sensory capabilities. Each time, the creature performed flawlessly, eliciting data that matched or exceeded the expected parameters. Yet Kai noticed the same subtle stress indicators recurring with increasing frequency. "The next phase will demonstrate feeding behavior," announced Dr. Vexel. "We've prepared a nutrient solution that replicates the biochemical composition of the Vorak's preferred prey. As a compartment within the habitat, open to reveal the feeding solution." Kai observed the Vorak's approach. Again, that telltale hesitation, more pronounced this time. The creature circled the feeding station, displaying what the professors identified as assessment behavior. But what Kai increasingly suspected was uncertainty. Without fully processing what he was doing, Kai raised his hand. Dr. Vexel's compound eyes swiveled toward him, and a ripple of surprised murmurs spread through the audience. Human students rarely volunteered observations during live demonstrations. "Yes, scholarship recipient Armand?" Dr. Vexel's tone was neutral, but carried undertones of wariness. "The specimen is showing signs of stress," Kai said, his voice steady despite the attention now focused on him. "That eyelid flutter is an assessment. It's discomfort. The feeding solution might be chemically correct, but something about its presentation is causing confusion. A weighted silence fell over the hall. Dr. Vexel's mandibles clicked once. A gesture Kai had learned indicated surprised consideration. "An interesting observation," she finally responded. "What evidence supports your conclusion?" Kai swallowed, aware that he was now committed. "The pattern matches stress behaviors in analogous Earth predators. When faced with prey that doesn't quite match their instinctual template, they exhibit similar hesitation. It's not fear. It's a processing delay while they reconcile conflicting sensory inputs." Krinax turned in his seat, his crystalline features refracting incredulity. "Or perhaps it's simply adjusting to the artificial environment. Not everything parallels your violent homeworld's behaviors." "Actually," Kai continued, emboldened by the scientific focus of the discussion, "may I use the habitat intercom? I'd like to test something." The professors exchanged glances. Using the intercom would allow direct audio communication with the specimen, a protocol typically reserved for faculty research, not student demonstrations. "This is highly irregular," began one of the assistant professors, but Dr. Vexel raised a slender limb. "Science advances through irregularity," she said. "Proceed, scholarship recipient Armand. The field controls are at Station 3. Kai made his way down to the indicated console, aware of hundreds of eyes tracking his movement. The control panel hummed to life at his approach, recognizing his student credentials and activating a localized interface. "The Vorax auditory range extends well beyond our own," he explained to the audience as he adjusted settings. "On its homeworld, certain low-frequency vibrations signal safe feeding conditions, usually produced by symbiotic species that share territory with the Vorak." He leaned toward the audio input and spoke in a calm, measured tone. "You're doing great. Just breathe." The words themselves were irrelevant. What mattered was the cadence and bass undertones of his voice, calibrated to approximate those symbiotic signals. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Vorak's posture shifted, its body language transforming from hesitant to focused. It approached the feeding station with newfound confidence and began to consume the nutrient solution with methodical efficiency. "Extraordinary," breathed Dr. Vexel, her scientific detachment momentarily slipping. "It's displaying feeding behavior identical to wild specimens, more natural than we've achieved in previous demonstrations." The audience erupted in murmurs of surprise and academic interest. Even Krinax had turned fully in his seat, his crystalline structure shifting to a hue that indicated intense focus. "How did you know that would work?" called out a student from the upper tiers. Kai returned to his seat before answering. "I didn't know for certain, but in studying Earth's apex predators, I've observed that confidence often depends on environmental cues, beyond just the presence of food. The Vorak evolved in an ecosystem with complex interspecies relationships. It made sense that it might respond to auditory reassurance." "Only a fellow Deathworlder could parse that nuance," Krinax remarked, but his tone had shifted from derision to something closer to reluctant acknowledgement. As the demonstration continued, the Vorak's behavior became noticeably more natural and fluid. The professors adjusted their presentation to incorporate Kai's insight, exploring how different audio frequencies affected the creature's responses. What had begun as a standard exhibition had transformed into a genuine research opportunity. At the session's conclusion, Dr. Vexel addressed the hall with evident satisfaction. "Today's demonstration has exceeded expectations in the finest tradition of scientific inquiry. It serves as a reminder that observation, true observation, requires us to question our assumptions." She activated a display that projected above the central platform. "Your assignment is to submit a behavioral response hypothesis based on today's demonstration. Using the data we've collected, predict how the Vorak might respond to a novel stimulus of your choosing. The most promising hypotheses will be tested in our next session." As students began filing out, discussions already buzzing about potential hypotheses, Dr. Vexel gestured for Kai to approach the faculty platform. That was an impressive intervention. Scholarship recipient Armand, she said when he reached her. Few students would have noticed such subtle behavioral indicators. Fewer still would have correctly interpreted them. And almost none would have proposed such an effective solution. Thank you, Dr. Vexel, Kai replied, conscious of maintaining formal protocol. Earth's biodiversity gave me a useful comparative framework. Indeed. Her compound eyes studied him with scientific intensity. Perhaps we have underestimated the value of your planet's evolutionary pressures. I look forward to your hypothesis submission. As Kai turned to leave, he found Mara waiting at the hall's entrance, her expression a mix of admiration and amusement. You just rewrote the demonstration playbook for one of the most studied predators in the galaxy, she said, falling into step beside him as they entered the crystal corridor. And you made it look casual. It wasn't anything special, Kai demurred. Just observation. Just observation, Mara echoed with a laugh. Says the guy who literally spoke Predator Whisperer to a Vorak. Half the class is already revising their notes to include your technique. They passed through the floating gardens, where ethereal plants from 100 worlds coexisted in carefully maintained biospheres. The synthetic sun had begun its programmed descent, casting longer shadows through the crystalline architecture. You should hear what they're saying, Mara continued. Krinax is actually defending your approach to a group of meridians. I think you shocked the prejudice right out of him. Kai allowed himself a small smile. One demonstration won't change everyone's mind about humans. Maybe not everyone, Mara agreed. But it's a start. Anyway, what are you planning for your hypothesis submission? Kai's expression grew thoughtful. Something that builds on today's discovery. If the Vorak responds to auditory cues that mimic its ecosystem, there might be other sensory inputs we haven't considered. Like what? I'm not entirely sure yet. I need to review some research on Nexus Free's atmospheric composition. There might be something there. For the next 3 days, Kai immersed himself in research. The Academy's archives contained extensive data on Nexus Free's ecology, though much of it remained theoretical due to the planet's extreme conditions. He cross-referenced environmental factors with the Vorak's physiological adaptations, searching for patterns that might have been overlooked. The breakthrough came during his review of seasonal variations in Nexus 4's lower atmosphere. During the planet's equivalent of spring, certain native plants released spores that created a distinctive resonance when carried on the wind, a phenomenon local xenobiologists had termed the singing season. This coincided precisely with the Vorak's primary mating period. Working late into the night, Kai developed a hypothesis. The Vorak's hunting behaviors might be influenced not just by individual survival needs, but by social coordination triggered by these seasonal cues. If correct, it would suggest a level of pack behavior previously unrecorded in a species long considered solitary. When the submission deadline arrived, Kai uploaded his hypothesis along with supporting data. The system confirmed receipt with a neutral tone that gave no indication of how his work might be received. All he could do now was wait for the next demonstration session. The grand lecture hall was even more crowded for the follow-up demonstration. News of the previous session's unexpected developments had spread throughout the Academy, attracting students and faculty from other departments. Kai found himself the subject of covert glances and whispered conversations as he made his way to his seat. This time, Krinax deliberately approached him before the session began. The Luridian's crystalline form glimmered with a blue-green hue that Kai had learned indicated intellectual engagement. Your observation technique was unorthodox, Krinax said, the musical quality of his voice lacking its usual condescension. But effective. I've incorporated some of your methodology into my own hypothesis. Coming from Krinax, this was tantamount to effusive praise. Kai nodded, accepting the olive branch for what it was. Comparative analysis often yields unexpected insights. I'd be interested to hear your perspective. Perhaps after the demonstration, Krynax replied, before moving to his usual seat. Mara arrived moments later, her expression bright with excitement. "The rumor mill is working overtime," she whispered as she sat beside Kai. "They say Dr. Vexel has selected 3 hypotheses for testing today, including yours." Before Kai could respond, the lighting dimmed, and Dr. Vexel entered alongside her colleagues. The central platform once again transformed to reveal the Vorax habitat, this time expanded to nearly twice its previous size. The Vorak itself appeared almost immediately, its movements more fluid and confident than during the first demonstration. "Welcome to our hypothesis testing session," Dr. Vexel began. "Today, we will examine selected student proposals that suggest novel behavioral responses in our Vorak specimen. Each hypothesis will be tested through controlled stimulus introduction." She activated a display that showed a summary of the first hypothesis, submitted by a Halcydian student who proposed that the Vorak might use its chromatophores for communication as well as camouflage. The test involved introducing a holographic projection of another Vorak displaying specific color patterns. The experiment proceeded with professional precision, but the results were inconclusive. The specimen acknowledged the hologram, but showed no distinctive communication patterns in response. The second hypothesis, submitted by Krynax, suggested that the Vorak might use seismic sensing to detect prey movements. By introducing subtle vibrations to different sections of the habitat, they tested whether the Vorak would respond preferentially to frequencies matching those of its natural prey. The results were positive but limited. The Vorak clearly detected the vibrations and investigated them, but showed no hunting behavior without additional visual or olfactory cues. "Our final hypothesis comes from scholarship recipient Armand," announced Dr. Vexel, activating the display to show Kai's submission. "He proposes that the Vorak, previously documented as a solitary hunter, may in fact possess latent pack behaviors triggered by seasonal atmospheric phenomena on its homeworld." A murmur of interest spread through the audience. The suggestion contradicted established xenobiological literature on the species. The test will involve introducing a controlled audio stimulus that replicates the singing season resonance of Nexus 4, combined with olfactory markers suggesting the presence of multiple prey species. The professors activated a series of subtle field emitters around the habitat's perimeter. For several moments, nothing seemed to happen. The Vorak continued its regular patrol of the enclosure, showing no remarkable response. Kai felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. Had he misinterpreted the data? Overreached in his analysis? Then, almost imperceptibly at first, the Vorak's behavior began to change. It paused in its circuit, its 4 eyes swiveling independently to survey different sections of the habitat. Its chromatophores shifted, creating a rippling pattern along its flanks that Kai had never seen documented in any research. "Remarkable," whispered one of the assistant professors. "It's displaying pre-hunt coordination signaling." What happened next exceeded even Kai's predictions. The Vorak moved to the center of the habitat and began a complex series of movements, alternating between visibility and camouflage in a rhythmic pattern that created the illusion of multiple Voraks circling the space. "It's simulating pack behavior," Dr. Vexel's voice held undisguised wonder. Creating the impression of coordinated hunters to confuse and corral prey. The audience watched, spellbound, as the Vorak executed what could only be described as a hunting dance. A sophisticated display that would, in the wild, serve to herd prey into a killing zone where they would perceive threats from multiple directions. "Hypothesis confirmed and exceeded," Dr. Vexel announced as the demonstration concluded. "What we've witnessed is not merely a behavioral response but potentially an evolutionary adaptation previously unknown to xenobiology." This suggests that Vorax social structures may be more complex than our current classification indicates. The hall erupted in academic excitement. Students turned to each other, datapads flashing as they recorded observations and implications. Through it all, Kai sat quietly, processing what they had witnessed, not just a confirmation of his hypothesis, but a window into a more nuanced understanding of predator evolution across worlds. As the session formally ended, Kai found himself surrounded by students eager to discuss his methodology and insights. Even species that had previously kept their distance now approached with questions and observations of their own. "Your hypothesis has implications beyond the Vorax species," said a Meridian doctoral candidate, whose name Kai couldn't recall. "If supposedly solitary apex predators exhibit conditional social behaviors, we may need to reassess evolutionary models across multiple biospheres." "The temporal aspect is particularly significant," added another student. "Seasonal triggers for social coordination suggest environmental adaptation at a population level, not just individual survival strategies." Through the crowd, Kai spotted Dr. Vexel conferring with senior faculty members. She gestured toward him, and the group nodded in apparent agreement before dispersing. As the crowd around Kai thinned, she approached with measured steps. "Scholarship recipient Armand," she began, her mantis-like form towering above the remaining students. "Your hypothesis has proven exceptionally valuable. The department would like to extend an invitation for you to participate in our research initiative on adaptive predator behaviors." Kai struggled to maintain his composure. Research initiatives were typically reserved for doctoral candidates and visiting scholars, not second-year students, and certainly not controversial Deathworlders on restrictive protocols. "I would be honored, Dr. Vexel," he managed to reply. "Excellent. There is one other matter." She produced a small device that Kai recognized immediately, a control unit for the behavior monitoring sensors embedded in his uniform. "The faculty has reviewed your restriction protocols and found them unnecessarily limiting for a student of your caliber. This will deactivate the continuous monitoring system." She handed him the device. "Consider it an acknowledgement that observation works both ways. We have observed your conduct and found it exemplary." As Dr. Vexel departed, Krinax approached. The Luridian's crystalline structure now pulsed with a warm amber glow, a color Kai had never seen him display before. "It seems I must reevaluate certain assumptions," Krinax said, his melodious voice carrying a note of genuine respect. "Your insight into the Vorax behavior was impressive. I would be interested in collaborating on a paper analyzing the implications of conditional pack tactics in apex predators." "I'd welcome the collaboration," Kai replied, still processing the rapid shift in his academic standing. "Good. I will send you my preliminary notes." Krinax hesitated, then added, "Your perspective adds a dimension my analysis lacked. Perhaps Deathworlder intuition has its merits." As Krinax glided away, Mara appeared at Kai's side, her expression jubilant. "Did I just witness Krinax suggesting a collaboration? The same Krinax who last week said humans shouldn't be allowed in theoretical lectures because our aggressive thought patterns might contaminate the discourse?" Kai laughed, feeling a weight lifting that he hadn't fully acknowledged until now. "Apparently, aggressive thought patterns make for good xenobiology." "Not aggressive," Mara corrected. "Empathetic. You saw what everyone else missed because you weren't just analyzing the Vorak. You were connecting with it. That's the thing about us dangerous Deathworlders that no one here gets. We didn't just evolve to fight. We evolved to understand." As they exited the hall, Kai noticed a subtle difference in how other students regarded him. The wary glances had been replaced by expressions of academic curiosity and, in some cases, genuine admiration. For the first time since arriving at Zenith Academy, he walked the crystal corridors without feeling the invisible burden of his Earth origins. That evening, in his dormitory pod, Kai composed a message to his family back on Earth. He had sent regular updates throughout his time at the Academy, but they had always been carefully worded, emphasizing his academic progress while downplaying the social isolation and institutional barriers. Tonight, he wrote with a new candor. Earth gave me survival, not just steel nerves, but empathy for the feared. Here I've learned that understanding is the ultimate apex skill. Today, for the first time. I was valued not despite being human, but because of it. The galaxy fears what we are, but they haven't yet grasped what we can become. As he completed the message, his datapad chimed with a notification. The Academy's central database had updated his student profile, where previously his status had read Scholarship Recipient, Restricted Protocols. It now displayed Research Associate, Xenobiology Initiative. Below that, a new entry had appeared in his academic schedule. Seminar Series, Deathworlder Instincts in Xenobiological Research, Co-Instructor. Kai stared at the screen in disbelief. Not only had his monitoring restrictions been lifted, but he was being invited to teach, to share his perspective with other students as a recognized authority, rather than a tolerated anomaly. A second notification appeared moments later. The Academy's archive system indicated multiple incoming messages, research invitations from departments across Zenith, and, more surprisingly, from institutes beyond the Academy. His demonstration with the Vorak had been recorded and shared through academic networks, catching the attention of xenobiologists throughout the sector. The implications were just beginning to sink in when a final notification arrived. This one bore the formal seal of the Interstellar Academic Council, the governing body that oversaw educational exchange programs between worlds. The message was brief, but profound. In light of recent contributions to xenobiological understanding, the Council has approved expanded placement opportunities for Earth origin students at Category 1 research institutions. Scholarship recipient Armand's work is cited as evidence supporting this policy revision. Kai sat back, overwhelmed by the cascading consequences of a single moment of insight. What had begun as a personal academic challenge had somehow catalyzed a shift in how an entire discipline, perhaps even an entire society, viewed his species. Morning brought new dimensions to Kai's changed status. As he entered the Academy's central atrium, he found Mara waiting with uncharacteristic formality. Beside her stood a small delegation of students representing various species and departments. "What's this?" he asked, approaching cautiously. "Your fan club," Mara replied with a grin. Or, more accurately, the newly formed Comparative Evolutionary Studies Group. They want you to be their faculty advisor. A slender Asridian stepped forward, their feathered crest rippling with what Kai recognized as earnest determination. "Your work with the Vorak demonstrates the value of cross-species insight. We believe a formal study group could build on this approach, applying Deathworlder observational techniques to various xenobiological challenges." "I'm not faculty," Kai protested. "I'm barely a research associate." "Actually," interjected a voice from behind him, "your status has been upgraded again." Kai turned to find Dr. Vexel approaching, her compound eyes reflecting the atrium's ambient light. "The Xenobiology Department has created a new position, Specialist in Evolutionary Comparative Analysis. The appointment documentation awaits your review." "This is happening very quickly," Kai said, struggling to keep pace with the rapid elevation of his academic standing. "Science often advances in unexpected bursts," Dr. Vexel replied. "When a paradigm shifts, institutions must adapt or become obsolete. Your insight has created such a moment." She gestured toward the student delegation. "These minds represent the future of xenobiology. They recognize what many of us missed, that true understanding requires diverse perspectives, including those we once feared." Throughout the following weeks, Kai's life transformed in ways he could never have anticipated. His research schedule expanded to include regular sessions with the Vorak, exploring the full range of its social behaviors. What had been considered a solitary apex predator was gradually revealed to possess a complex conditional sociality that had eluded previous researchers. Crinax proved to be a surprisingly complementary research partner. The Luridian's meticulous data analysis balanced Kai's intuitive approach, resulting in a preliminary paper that was already generating significant attention in academic circles. Most surprisingly, Kai found himself leading seminars on Deathworlder observational techniques, teaching students from across the galaxy how to apply Earth-evolved instincts to xenobiological research. What had once been regarded as dangerous liabilities, heightened threat assessment, pattern recognition tuned for predator-prey dynamics, empathetic projection, were now being studied as valuable scientific tools. "The irony isn't lost on me," Kai remarked to Mara, as they observed a group of students attempting to apply his techniques during a practical session. 6 months ago, I was followed by safety protocols. Now they're literally trying to think like me. "That's how progress works," Mara replied. "Yesterday's monster is tomorrow's inspiration. It helps that you're exceptionally non-threatening for a terrifying Deathworlder." "I try my best," Kai laughed. "Though I did hear a rumor that a group of Ventosian first-years still activate their atmospheric filters when I walk by. Old prejudices die hard, but new evidence speaks louder." The evidence continued to accumulate. As Kai's research with the Vorak progressed, patterns emerged that suggested its social behaviors weren't an anomaly, but part of a broader evolutionary strategy. Similar conditional sociality was subsequently documented in apex predators from 3 other worlds, species previously classified as solitary hunters. 2 months after the initial demonstration, Kai found himself preparing for a presentation to the Academy's Grand Symposium, an honor typically reserved for senior researchers presenting groundbreaking discoveries. His topic: Adaptive Social Dynamics in Apex Predators, a Cross-Planetary Analysis, had drawn registration requests from institutes across the sector. On the morning of the symposium, Kai stood in his dormitory, adjusting the formal academic robes that had replaced his monitoring embedded uniform. A chime at his door announced a visitor, Dr. Vexel, her towering form barely clearing the entrance. "Nervous, Specialist Armand?" she inquired, using his new title with the precise formality that characterized her species. "Terrified," Kai admitted. "I'm about to tell some of the galaxy's most distinguished xenobiologists that they've been misclassifying apex predators for decades." "Science advances through correction," Dr. Vexel reminded him. "But that is not why I've come. There is news you should hear before your presentation." She handed him a datapad displaying an official communication from the Interstellar Academic Council. Kai scanned it quickly, his eyes widening as he absorbed its contents. "Is this accurate?" he asked, hardly daring to believe what he was reading. "Entirely. The Council has approved the establishment of an Earth Exchange program, a dedicated academic track for human students at Category 1 institutions throughout the Orion Arm. You are being offered the position of Program Coordinator." Kai sank into the nearest chair, overwhelmed. All this from one observation about a Vorak? "Not from the observation itself," Dr. Vexel corrected, "but from what it represents. Your work has demonstrated that Deathworlder perspectives add essential dimensions to our understanding. Dimensions we cannot afford to exclude if we truly seek knowledge." She moved toward the door, then paused. "There is one other thing. The Nexian Protectorate has requested your assistance with their Vorak Conservation Initiative. It seems your insights have implications for their reintroduction program." After she departed, Kai stood motionless, contemplating the chain of events that had brought him to this moment. From isolated scholarship recipient to program coordinator and conservation consultant, all because he had seen what others missed in a predator's hesitation. The symposium itself passed in a blur of presentations, questions, and academic discourse. Kai delivered his findings to a packed auditorium, his voice steady as he outlined the evidence for redefining how xenobiology classified and understood apex predator behaviors. What we once viewed as simple hunting mechanics, we now recognize as complex adaptive strategies, he concluded. And perhaps more importantly, what we once feared as alien and incomprehensible, we now appreciate as different expressions of universal evolutionary principles. The Vorak is not monstrous because it is deadly. It is magnificent because it has mastered its environment in ways we are only beginning to understand. The applause that followed wasn't merely polite acknowledgement, but genuine appreciation. A room full of the galaxy's brightest minds, recognizing that their understanding had been fundamentally expanded. As Kai stepped away from the podium, he caught sight of Mara in the audience, her proud smile reflecting his own sense of accomplishment. Beside her sat Krinax, his crystalline structure glowing with a deep blue that signified profound intellectual satisfaction. In that moment, Kai understood that he had achieved something beyond academic recognition. He had begun to bridge a gulf between worlds, not by denying his Earth origins or by proving himself safe despite them, but by demonstrating that the very adaptations that made humans dangerous could also make them uniquely valuable. Later that evening, as celebration receptions filled the Academy's floating gardens, Kai found a quiet moment to send one final message home to Earth. Today I spoke not as an exception or an experiment, but as a colleague and a contributor. The path being forged now isn't just for me. It's for all of us who have been defined by where we come from, rather than what we can offer. The galaxy feared Deathworlders because they didn't understand us. Now they're beginning to see that understanding itself is our greatest strength. As he looked up from his datapad, Kai noticed a small group of first-year students watching him from across the garden. A diverse collection of species, including a young human who stood slightly apart, bearing the tentative posture Kai recognized all too well. With a smile, he crossed the space between them. You must be Jin Chen, Earth's newest scholarship recipient. Welcome to Zenith Academy. Things are a little different here now than when I arrived. The student's eyes widened in recognition. Specialist Armand, your work on predator sociality is why I applied to the xenobiology track. Call me Kai, he replied, gesturing for the group to join him. And let me introduce you to some colleagues who might change how you see the galaxy, and how it sees you. As they moved through the reception, Kai caught sight of the Vorak demonstration being replayed on a large display. The creature's fluid movements and complex behaviors were being analyzed by a cluster of researchers. Its once feared predatory nature, now viewed through a lens of scientific appreciation rather than instinctive dread. In that parallel, Kai found a fitting symmetry. Like the Vorak, humans would always carry the evolutionary imprint of their challenging homeworld. But now, perhaps, they would be valued for the unique perspective that evolution had granted them, not feared for the strength it had required. Understanding was indeed the ultimate apex skill.